Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. Now, in this matchup of vampire counts against the High Elves, you're almost immediately probably seeing that this build is a little funky. So, I wanted to try out an all-ethereal build. It used to be kind of a thing people would sometimes run against greenskins back in the day, just for kicks. There's a lot of factions against which this is very risky, but I think the High Elves are one of those where it's passable, and you can get away with it. In most situations. So for my Lord, I decided to bring Vlad, and obviously the Lord, you can't bring an ethereal Lord, so he's the only non-ethereal unit here. But I try to go as loyal to that concept as possible, and I stay as faithful as possible to all Hex Wraith and all ethereal build. So I didn't even bring the zombie. There's no zombie summon, no raised dead, just Van Hels's Dance Macabre to compensate for the low stats of the Hex Wraiths and the Cairn Wraiths. And then Invocation of the Heck, of course, to keep them alive, because if they crumble, this is all over. Blood Drinker, of course, to keep them alive. I was definitely trying to cut corners here, and so I did bring Blood Drinker. I did bring Master of Beguilement for that debuff, and otherwise Vlad's pretty cheap form here. Front line of Cairn Wraiths, 5 units of them. Obviously, these guys, nothing spectacular stat-wise. 44 weapon strength, which is great, and most of that is armor piercing. Disproportionately, most of that is armor piercing, even compared to other armor piercing units. But low melee attack, low melee defense, and not much charge bonus. So honestly, their biggest saving grace here is that physical resist. Their HP is pretty low, and they do cause fear and terror though. And of course, they are ethereal, which means they don't have any penalties for crossing terrain. They are backed by 2 Banshees. The Banshees were stripped down. I was considering getting one of the Wailing Banner, I do believe it's called, which reduces enemy leadership by 4, but I wasn't able to fit that in cost-wise. I would have had to drop a unit of Cairn Wraith, so I decided not to. Instead, I've got 1 Banshee with Slippery, 1 without. They're basically there to encourage the front line and to dish out some damage to heroes and more troublesome units, though obviously their melee attack and melee defense still isn't all that good. Out on the periphery, we do have 2 units of Hex Wraiths as well as the Chill Guys to help counteract enemy skirmishers a little bit, as well as to apply pressure to the back line, which is especially important given that I didn't bring Raised Dead on Vlad in an effort to stay faithful to all ethereal. My opponent here decided to do a pretty, I think, standard and fairly reasonable high elf build. Front line composed of 2 white lines of Krace backed by 4 spearmen, so this would be able to hold against just about any normal undead line for a reasonable amount of time. They are backed by 3 units of archers, the unarmored variant. Obviously these guys can do some great chip damage and whittle down everything short of Graveguard really, and some of the heavy cav, and they'll deal with monsters and that sort of stuff pretty well. A Lore Master of Hoth with Spirit Leech, Melkoth's Mystify Miasma, as well as Earthblood, so some spell power there. Oh, and actually Harmonic Convergence as well. I missed that over there. A Noble to provide some anti-large, though interestingly enough on foot, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. Usually Nobles are best brought on horse. And then Tyrion with the Heart of Avalorn and Faint Interpost. And when I saw my opponent's build here, the first thing I was checking is if he brought Teclis, who would be the most dangerous proposition for me. And the second thing I was checking was if my opponent had brought the Sunfang, and he actually didn't. So at this point, my opponent only really has 1 decent magic source, and that is the Lore Master of Hoth with Melkoth's Mystify Miasma. So I'm definitely feeling a little more confident about my prospects here. My opponent also does have a single unit of Phoenix Guard on this, anchoring this flank, and 2 units of Swordmasters in the back. And the Swordmasters, I do believe they'll actually outtrade. They'll probably beat Cairn Wraiths, but probably not cost effectively because Cairn Wraiths are just so very tanky. Regardless, I'm immediately trying to pincer. You can see the Archer Fire already coming in. And honestly, Cairn Wraiths, because they've got 0 armor and no shields, despite that 75% damage resist, they're still going to be taking a lot of hate. They've got very low HP, so honestly, those Archers will whittle some of these units down quite significantly. So I really need to get rid of those Archers as quickly as possible, because you can see already these Cairn Wraiths are down by about 500 HP in a matter of seconds. So about a sixth of their, they're going to be down about a fifth of their HP before lines ever meet. Maybe about a quarter actually. So regardless, you can see I'm immediately starting to plunge my Hex Wraith straight through the gap. My opponent was trying to mirror me a little bit with the spears and the Swordmasters, making a little bit of box here, but I do plow straight through with the Hex Wraiths, trying to get into those Archers and interrupt them. In the meantime, you can see on the charge immediately so much damage going down immediately on those white lines of Krace. You can see, unfortunately, I overcast Invocation of the Heck, trying to get it on these units over here, but it misses these Cairn Wraiths because of the positioning on it, and it latched onto this unit for Cairn Wraiths, so that sucked a little bit. But you know what, it's okay. In the meantime, these Cairn Wraiths and the Hex Wraiths are collapsing these Archers, and they're going to be collapse these white lines rather quickly. In the meantime, my opponent's finally shifting his Swordmasters in, but you can see that's going to open up path for me to flank in. Fortunately, Vlad over here is getting beaten down pretty bad. I do hit these white lines with Master Beguilement and then decide that Vlad needs to run. Vlad does have a decent mobility at 40, which actually makes him faster than Tyrion, makes him faster than both of these high elf heroes, and so we're simply going to skedaddle out of here and go find a different spot on the map to fight. We do plow into these Swordmasters of Hoth. One of the things I actually learned recently, and perhaps is does, I guess, make me. It definitely kind of shows how the game doesn't really show debuffs and doesn't really convey everything very well. But at the same time, I didn't know this and I hadn't really bothered to check. But there's actually a melee attack bonus, and I finally figured out if you're flanking an enemy, and I finally figured out what that was. And it's actually a bonus of 25 apparently, or debuff to melee defense of 25. So against all these heavily high quality elven troops, the fact that they're suddenly flanked, it means that they are going to be much less effective at defending themselves against the low stats of these hex rates and these hex troops. See, with that monster's AP weapon strength, they're just cleaving straight through these Swordmasters of Hoeth, who have already lost about a third of their HP on the charge from those hex rates, which don't have the most spectacular charge bonus. Well, they're just cleaving through them. Over here you can see the Karen Raids hacking into the Swordmasters, and the Chill guys do pile into the Archers to force a rout, and of course Terra kicks in, and these guys are broken almost instantly. Some of these Karen Raids will go down. They're getting sliced up a little bit over here, but you know what? Simply put, who cares? It doesn't really matter. They're just dealing with one unit of Karen Wraiths. In the meantime, Vlad is over here providing his Aura of Beguilement, which is nuking these guys' stats down. And these Karen Wraiths, you can see here the Karen Wraiths don't really do well. If they get stuck in a straight-up fight against even a fairly low-tier infantry like these Spearmen, they're not very good against low-tier infantry that can hold their ground, and they struggle to hit. These Spearmen, as you can see, because they're not being attacked from behind, they're just holding their ground great. And they're trading incredibly effectively with these Karen Raids. Maybe they won't win in the long run, but this is sort of the worst matchup you can get. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, that's not the matchup we're seeing on most of the map. You can see white lines shattering. The Phoenix Guard here anchoring things, but you can see the Swordmasters of Hoeth lacking that immunity psychology are breaking, and I'm pulling my Hex Rates out, in and out to start cycle charging, and these guys are going to pull clear. The Karen Raids in the meantime are going to start collapsing on the Phoenix Guard and move to chop them to bits, and the Banshee raking in some kills there. And you can see over here Vlad still being hit by Spear Legion. My opponent was very dedicated to killing Vlad here, not entirely sure why, but or perhaps figuring that that's his best bet of crumbling my army. One of the other problems for the Hex units is that they're very susceptible to morale breaks. They have very low morale to begin with. If we check here, these guys have a base morale of 38, so honestly, flanking these guys, even if you don't have a lot of it, and I've shown this in some of my previous games, even if you don't have a lot of sources of magic damage, if you're just able to hit hex units with morale debuffs, their leadership cracks, their low HP means that they crumble incredibly quickly and they're gone. Nonetheless, Vlad is constantly running from this goon squad that my opponent's trying to hit me with. Over here, the spears, once again, they're going to hold rather well against these hex rates, but the hex rates here aren't here to really kill these spears. Or they're just there to tie them down while the second unit of Hex Wraith is going to cycle around and go for a back charge into these archers, who are still raining death and destruction on my Hex Wraiths here. You can see they're cleaving through these Phoenix Guard pretty effectively. Phoenix Guard has 100 armor, which is basically irrelevant against Karen Wraiths, and they do have physical resist, which once again irrelevant against Hex Wraiths with their magic damage. So you can see a charge going into those archers over there. The Chill guys pulling clear because I don't want the Chill guys getting stuck in a protracted engagement. I want to be using them as to charge in and out, cause fear and terror constantly, and just nuke my opponent out that way. Over here, the Banshee is getting into a bit of a duel situation. She's actually okay in duels, but she's not amazing either. So she'll do okay. She's beating down this Noble, but the Noble's got 60 melee defense, so realistically the Banshee's hitting him bare minimum like 10% of the time. So it's really not very reliable for her. Regardless, Vlad here helping break these spearmen who are going to rout. You can see that Hex Wraith's doing some great work, but my opponent has finally gotten clear of that mob and is pushing straight in against Vlad. And of course, with the Lore Master in there with his bonus against infantry, I'm not sure what his bonus against infantry is. Check real quick. He has a bonus against infantry of 16, so he's going to be hitting Vlad very consistently. Vlad's melee defense is only 50. Tyrion, of course, is monstrous melee stats. If they can goon Vlad out, perhaps my opponent can still bring it back from the brink, because as you can see, things are definitely looking grim. Over here, the Phoenix Guard does get flanked, and that means they're shortly going to get spanked. The Hex Wraiths are just collapsing on them. The archers over there shattering. The Phoenix Guard is not going to be long for this world. Anytime my opponent does have some Swordmasters over here, some Spearmen rallying. A lot of the routes are just terror-induced, and I haven't been too good about pursuing. Regardless, here Vlad is in some deep trouble. I hit Tyrion with Master Beguilement. You can see Tyrion is still sitting where is Tyrion? I'm trying to find Tyrion here, but it's hard. He's hard to find. But if we look at Tyrion, he's still got 61 melee attack despite being hit by -4 melee attack debuff. So that just shows how much of a chance Vlad has if he stays in a fight against these guys. I do hit my troops with a final invocation on the heck and then skedaddle out of there once again, using that superior speed Vlad's got to outpace all of these enemy heroes. In the meantime, on the flanks, my opponent's army is looking very, very poor. You can see the 2 units of Hex Wraiths have kind of collapsed on these Phoenix Guard, done a bit of damage, but now I'm going to back off and let the hero and Karen Wraith squad over there do the job as I jump on these Swordmasters of Hoeth, and you can see they're collapsing incredibly quickly. Their melee defense has been nuked down thanks to their loss of martial prowess. They're getting cleaved to death by these ethereal monstrosities, and you can see these poor guys just getting cut down. by the little Grim Reapers. Another charge from the Chill Guys, and it's just a total massacre at this point. As the High Elves are getting dragged down to the pits. My opponent does have still have this 3-man hero squad, but even they are susceptible to Terra. Earthblood does go down, but that's not going to be a saving grace here. There's a Banshee on this Noble. They're surrounded. They've lost their advantages really. Phoenix Guard finally breaks the Terror, and that is going to be it for my opponent's army. So, a close victory for the Vampire counts. And you might say this is a bit of a gimmicky build, and this is a bit of a cheesy build. It kind of is, but at the same time, you gotta when you're choosing to run a Hex Wraith-based build or a Ethereal-based build, you have to consider what faction you're going against. And High Elves are one of the most susceptible factions to this sort of thing. Honestly, out of all the factions, they're one of the most susceptible. Potentially Dwarves could be if you're willing to try to work around the fact that they're reducing your damage by 25%. Dwarves might be workable. Those Slayers will give you a nasty run for your money, and I think, obviously Runes of Wrath and Ruin and those sorts of things can be very annoying. And if your opponent brings PK Guard, you're completely screwed. But that's a potential playground, I think. But Greenskins used to be, but with Fists of Gork, Greenskins do have a little bit of an answer. Plus some of their spells got improved damage-wise, so they're a little better there. But I think, obviously there are a few situations, there are quite a few factions and quite a few matchups where ethereal builds are viable, and I think High Elves are one of them where they're really viable. Personally, and this is just a bit of a tip here, if you're going up against undead, even if your opponent isn't going to bring a sort of a mob of Karen and Hex Wraiths, consider bringing Techless as the High Elves, or Dragons. You either want Dragons for the breath attack, which will annihilate the Karen pretty effectively, and these guys aren't that good at killing dragons to begin with. Otherwise, I think you want Techless with Flaying Sword of Ruin, which can completely annihilate these sorts of troops as well. Because as we discussed, they have very pitiful melee defense, and they tend to take a lot of damage. So you can, with Flaying Sword of Ruin, you drop it on your archers, they'll be doing 100% damage, and the Carronades don't have any other protection against archers, so that's going to be bye-bye pretty quickly. Otherwise, a Phoenix is a pseudo counter. It debuffs their melee attack even further than it's already bad, like 20, 24, or whatever. So if you get a Phoenix in there, the Frostheart Phoenix, it causes magic damage itself. It's very hard to hit and makes these guys even less reliable. But so that's a pseudo counter. But I think really what you want is Techless or a Dragon with breath attacks to nuke these guys down. Because otherwise the Ithilmar, I think it's the Ithilmar Chariot. No, maybe not. Maybe it's the Tirnoch Chariot. The one that shoots arrows. It actually does magic missiles, which could be okay. But regardless, tough matchup for the High Elves, and definitely one of those nasty things you can do as Vampire counts. As far as the army comp goes, Carronades, of course, and of course the kill count wasn't going to be monstrous on either side, really. I don't think. Both of our armies were rather small. Well, my opponent's not so much, I guess. You can actually see the Hex Wraiths who were jumping around all over the place, getting rear charges, or just slaughtering these archers and doing some immense work in the back line, and raking in 97 and over 100 kills. And these guys get 2 chevrons. The Chill Guys, of course, didn't gain any chevrons, but 165 kills, so some monstrous work here between these Chill Guys and Hex Wraiths. And one of the things, if my opponent had brought, say, Dragon Princes or Silver Helms, they would have got stomped pretty hard by Hex Wraiths. And actually, maybe not. Dragon Princes would probably trade well with Hex Wraiths, and I didn't think about that when going in. But Dragon Princes have a 70% magic or 70% fire resist, and Hex Wraiths, for some ungodly reason, do magic and fire damage. So, they'd be able to tank pretty well, I suppose. So I guess that's a bit of a miscalculation on my part. I guess they would be able to take. But regardless, they'll be able to trash Silver Helms and those sorts of troops. And if you need to deal with Dragon Princes, you can pull Carronades off the line for that. Banshees didn't do too great. I don't really know what Banshees are good at. I guess not shanking enemy heroes, but they didn't seem to do too much damage. But they did hold the line together. They did interfere with my opponent's back line and were basically a nuisance. Flatty Daddy, of course, just staying alive. For my opponent, some rough stuff. He didn't have too many counters to what I brought. Lore Master of Hoeth, Noble, Tyrion did some damage. The rest of the front line here basically folded like a wet paper rag. And you can see a lot of these troops got wiped out almost to man because, of course, that fast-moving undead infantry and the cavalry just runs them down and slaughters them on the retreat. So, nonetheless, you can see we're having 83 troops left. So, rough stuff. Regardless, 90% casualties. Regardless, good game to my opponent. Ultra Husto Demon. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do hope you found it entertaining and perhaps a little give you some nasty ideas on what you can do to high elves, or perhaps it gives you some ideas on how to counteract the undead if you're or counteract ethereal units as high elves. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, the usual, please post down below, and I'll respond. And I'll read it and respond as soon as I'm able. And I suppose that's it. I'll sign off, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.